Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tracing a geopolitical chain reaction, and it really shows how intervention is never ever a straight line. It's always a boomerang.
Hmm.
Our mission here is to analyze this incredibly tight sequence of events just a few months in early 2026, where a military victory that was, celebrated in Washington ends up triggering a catastrophic global energy collapse.
It's the ultimate lesson in strategic blowback. I mean, we found this fascinating narrative showing how a failure in logistics, not a failure of military force, created this devastating political precedent.
A precedent that rivals just immediately jumped on.
Immediately.
So the core question we are answering today, and this is all based on the documents we reviewed, is pretty simple. How did the removal of Venezuela's dictator Maduro lead directly to WTI crude hitting, an economy killing $250 a barrel?
And it wasn't a slow burn. That's the key. It was a rapid-fire sequence of actions and reactions.
Yeah.
It really proves that instability in one region, it just doesn't stay there.
It's not localized.
It's never localized. When you take Venezuelan oil supply offline, the sheer volume of it, you basically eliminate all margin for error everywhere else.
Okay, let's unpack this. We should start with what looked, at least on the surface, like a huge success. So we're jumping into our first segment, the illusion of victory, or the Venezuelan quagmire.
Right.
The date is January 25th, 2026. The U.S. has pulled off the regime change. Washington is celebrating. But what is the 10th Mountain Division actually seeing on the ground?
Well, that celebration it's incredibly short-lived. The strategic victory just collapses almost overnight into a tactical nightmare. The U.S. forces, they're not up against a standing army.
No.
They're facing this mixed, very determined coalition of regime remnants, elements of the ELN, that's the National Liberation Army, and this is the key part, highly trained Russian private military advisors.
And the sources we found really highlight that the Russians were central to shaping this whole resistance. This wasn't just some local uprising.
That's exactly right. The lead Russian advisor, he's named Ivan in the sources, he had a very, very clear directive from the Kremlin. The goal wasn't to defeat the Americans in, a big battle. It was to execute a strategy designed to, and this is a direct quote, create a second Vietnam.
Wow.
They didn't need to win territory. They just needed to kill the American sense of security.
And the terrain, the geography helped them do that perfectly. We often forget, Venezuela is rich in oil, but its topography is just brutally complex. The sources call it the geographical triple threat.
Absolutely. I mean, think about the physical challenge here. You have three totally distinct, really difficult terrain zones. You've got the rugged, high-altitude Andes Mountains, perfect cover for hidden bases.
Right.
Then you've got the vast, almost impenetrable southern Amazon jungle, and then the densely packed urban slums, the barrios of Caracas.
So a guerrilla could just strike and melt away instantly.
Into any one of those environments, and they proved to be incredibly effective.
And what about the hardware they were using? What was the signal that this was, more than just a militia?
Well, they were using sophisticated Russian equipment, specifically the Kornet anti-tank missile system. This is a crucial detail because these are highly accurate, really potent weapons.
So the moment they hit something valuable.
The moment they successfully hit a lead striker vehicle, which is a huge psychological blow, not to mention a material loss, it just signals that this resistance is trained, it's well-equipped, and it is more than willing to target high-value American assets.
So their strategy wasn't about fighting the army head-on. It was about destroying the prize itself.
Exactly. They turned the oil supply into the battlefield. They weren't just blowing up a pipeline here and there. They were systematically taking out power grids, pumping stations, processing facilities faster than any engineering corps could possibly repair them.
The sheer scale of what you'd need to protect is just staggering.
It's staggering. And the sources sum it up perfectly. The oil fields just rapidly transformed into an investment impossible quagmire. The oil is still there, sure, but getting it out became economically and militarily impossible.
And that's the moment the political failure crashes right into economic reality. So let's move to our second segment, the crushing cost and the creation of precedent. If the dictator is gone, but the oil isn't flowing, what's the mood in Washington?
Utter panic. I mean, you can just imagine the White House meetings. They're all asking, why isn't the oil getting through?
Because the whole justification was.
It was swift stabilization. Secure the supply, stabilize global prices. Instead, prices are actually creeping up, and the military commitment is just ballooning.
So what was the the final nail in the coffin, logistically? What broke the back of the intervention?
The National Security Advisor delivers the brutal truth. To secure that vast pipeline network, we're talking thousands of miles across mountains and jungles, it would require a troop commitment. And their assessment said it would be on the scale of the Vietnam War.
Wow. So a quick, celebrated action becomes this endless, budget-crushing occupation.
An occupation that delivered zero of the promised economic benefits.
So the key takeaway here is America succeeded in the political goal, getting rid of the dictator, but completely catastrophically failed on the actual strategic goal.
Which was stable oil supply. It's a totally empty victory.
Or worse than empty, right?
Yeah.
Because it created this dangerous vulnerability. The world watched the U.S. fail on the logistics, but succeed on the politics.
And it was that success, the assertion of the right to intervene, the precedent, that mattered most to other global players.
And this is exactly where the crisis jumps to the Middle East. There's this phone call between Netanyahu and the U.S. president right at this moment of maximum chaos in Venezuela. What did he say?
The exchange is ice cold. Netanyahu doesn't even argue about the failure in Venezuela. He acknowledges it. He says, you got a quagmire, you wasted resources. But then he asserts that the act itself, the decision to unilaterally remove a sovereign leader, created the necessary precedent.
The precedent. So what does that allow? Why was the American failure to get the oil so useful to Israel?
It gave them a kind of moral and political shield. Netanyahu's logic was, well, it was simple but devastatingly effective. He says, look, the world just watched America forcibly remove a leader for its own self-interest, which was oil or money.
Okay.
So he says Israel will now use that same logic, but for a much more critical national interest, survival or life.
So he's translating the American logic of economic necessity into an Israeli logic of existential necessity.
Precisely. And he uses that call to announce his plan. They're going to use a similar swift decapitation-style model, he claims, on the U.S. action to extract Iran's supreme leader.
And the U.S. president tries to stop him, right? He must have known the consequences.
Oh, desperately. The warning was crystal clear. If Iran retaliates by closing the Strait of Hormuz, and you couple that with Venezuelan oil already being offline, the president warned the global economy would just die.
But Netanyahu didn't care.
He was already playing a different game. He just dismisses the warning. He says, that is your miscalculation. It is not our problem. He saw global economic stability as a non-factor compared to his security imperative. He had the precedent he needed, and he hung up the phone.
The die is cast. Which brings us to segment 3, the Strait of Inferno and Russia's Devil's Bargain. The timeline just accelerates terrifyingly here.
It really does. Less than 24 hours after that call, January 26th, the Mossad operation goes down. The sources are really explicit that the plan mirrored that swift decapitation approach from the Venezuela playbook.
And the supreme leader.
The Iranian supreme leader just disappears in the chaos of Tehran.
Now, unlike Venezuela, where the government crumbled but the resistance was decentralized, how did the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, respond?
The IRGC did not crumble. They reacted with what the sources describe as just boiling rage and this nationalistic fervor. They didn't focus on getting the leader back. They focused on maximum global retaliation.
Against the economies of Israel's allies.
Exactly. Which means they went immediately for the global artery, the Strait of Hormuz.
And for anyone listening who maybe doesn't follow oil shipping daily, just remind us why Hormuz is so critical.
It is the choke point. Something like 20% of the entire world's daily oil consumption passes through that tiny strait every single day.
So shutting it down is like...
It's like performing emergency bypass surgery on the global supply chain with a rusty knife. The IRGC did it with swarms. Thousands of missiles and drones launched from the Iranian coast, targeting every single vessel in sight.
So they're not just sinking ships, they're physically blocking the passage.
Yes. Tankers were disabled, they burst into flames, creating these massive blockages. And at the same time, specialized IRGC vessels were laying mines all along the narrow shipping lanes.
The effect was instantaneous.
Completely. The waterway was sealed. No commercial insurer, no shipper would dare go near the area.
And within 4 days, by January 30th, the market responds. Venezuelan oil is off, Middle Eastern oil is trapped, and WTI crude hits $250 a barrel.
And that number, it doesn't just mean expensive gas. It means the end of affordable global trade as we know it.
What do the sources say about that?
They indicate that supply chain experts realized immediately that a sustained $250 a barrel meant the cost of energy for everything, shipping, farming, manufacturing, It would double or triple overnight. Consumer demand would just seize up, factories would halt.
And you get hyperinflation.
Hyperinflation engulfs Western economies almost immediately.
And this is where the collateral damage slams into the industrial superpower of Asia, China.
Absolutely. The documents detail this furious phone call Putin gets from Xi Jinping. China's industrial machine, it runs on imported energy, and Xi confirms their strategic reserves will only last a few weeks. The global economy is collapsing, but China is facing a full-blown internal catastrophe.
And here's Putin not seeing a disaster, but seeing the ultimate geopolitical opportunity.
He literally interrupts Xi's panic to reframe the entire situation. This is the moment where Russia, which was, a discounted supplier, achieves total energy hegemony over the world's factory.
So what's the offer?
He offers China a lifeline, but at a punishing cost. He says he will divert all Russian crude, which was going cheaply to India for processing, and send it directly to China.
And crucially, this is through the ESPIO pipeline, the Eastern Siberia Pacific Ocean pipeline. Why is its geography so important here?
Because it is entirely land-based. It runs thousands of miles across Russia and into China. That means it is completely safe from the American Navy in the Pacific and critically safe from any kind of Israeli sabotage. It's a secure, landlocked supply chain.
And the terms of the deal?
No discounts, no friendship pricing. The price is the full, catastrophic global market rate, $250 a barrel.
So he's leveraging their desperation.
Completely. It's still cheaper for China than shutting down their factories, so they're forced to capitulate. And just like that, Russia stabilizes its own economy and locks in control over China's industrial base for the foreseeable future. A brilliant, cold calculation.
It's incredible. All these massive military and economic events, all put in motion by a single word precedent and one final, almost comical action. We have to go back in the timeline to find the true catalyst. This brings us to our last segment, the Joker's joke.
This is the real aha moment in the sources. It shows how casually these geopolitical signals can be thrown out there, only to be seized and weaponized by your rivals. We have to flash back a few days before the Mossad operation, right after Maduro was removed.
Okay, so the U.S. president is feeling good. He's on the phone with Putin, boasting about the beautiful operation, talking about peace through strength. He's relaxed. He's cracking jokes.
Exactly. And right in the middle of this casual, boastful conversation, the president jokes to Putin. He says something like, hey, Vladimir, why don't you go ahead and extract Khamenei in Iran? World peace, gaha.
I can just imagine the silence on the other end of the line.
There was a moment of silence. Then Putin just laughs quietly, acknowledges the comment. But the sources confirm the calculation he made immediately after that call was clinical.
What was the calculation?
He turns to his aide and he says, yes, he knows it was a joke. But, and this is the key, he immediately points out that the fact that the American president desires it is useful.
So the joke is taken not as humor, but as a political signal. A secret, informal stamp of approval.
And that signal was acted on right away.
Wow.
Putin immediately calls Netanyahu. He doesn't order him to do anything, but he plants the seed. He gives the idea this powerful, unofficial endorsement. He tells Netanyahu, I heard an interesting story in my call with Trump. It seems he wishes for the Iranian leader to disappear.
So that joke, delivered so casually, was used by Putin to give Netanyahu the final psychological push he needed.
It confirmed that even if the U.S. couldn't officially support an operation in Iran, the administration secretly wanted it. It removed Netanyahu's biggest political risk, which was being immediately and totally condemned by Washington.
So the entire catastrophic sequence,
Yeah.
the extraction, the Hormuz closure, $250 a barrel for crude, was ultimately kicked off by one careless offhand joke that was immediately interpreted by rivals as hidden intent. So what does this all mean? If you trace the sequence one last time, the sources make it chillingly clear. The boomerang of that carelessly thrown joke hit the reflector known as Putin, was turned into a weapon known as Netanyahu, and came right back to slash the throat of the American economy.
And by the spring of 2026, the global picture is dire. Oil prices are way above $250, supply chains are broken, and the sources indicate widespread civil unrest. Riots across the U.S. because of the economic collapse.
The entire intervention, meant to secure oil and demonstrate strength, just resulted in absolute ruin at home.
Meanwhile, Putin's satisfied. He's watching the ESPO pipeline flow meters and concluded the crisis served its purpose. His final thought in the sources is just muttered to himself, the world has become peaceful, at least for Russia.
This whole deep dive really showed us how catastrophic a domino effect can be when the traditional rules are just gone. A single word precedent and a single careless joke were the only triggers two opposing powers needed to risk a global economic collapse for their own narrow interests. And this raises a really important question for you, the listener, to think about. Leaders react not just to formal policies, but to perceived intentions. When you're dealing with rivals, how much hidden value do powerful actors place on political signals, on offhand remarks, even jokes? What other seemingly minor comments might be out there right now today, just waiting to be weaponized?